So let's talk about Red Cortez saying that capitalism is an irredeemable system. Because to be honest with you, in many ways, she has a point, but she's not talking about capitalism. The problem is, of course, is that she's not all that bright. So this was quite interesting. She was at South by Southwest, which I understand is some kind of festival of culture and apparently now politics. And she said that capitalism was an irredeemable system. She said, capitalism is an ideology of capital. The most important thing is the concentration of capital and seek and maximize profit. And that comes at any cost to people and the environment. So to me, capitalism is irredeemable. Now, I mean, she's not wrong about the fact that, like, neoliberalism, what people call corporatism, what I think they mean is neoliberalism, is definitely about the concentration of capital and seeking to maximize profits. That is a demonstrable, obvious truth. But I mean, I'm of the opinion that that's why neoliberalism kind of sucks. I mean, for example, and she later says, we should be scared right now because corporations have taken over our government. That's true as well. I mean, if you just look at the old guard establishment, I mean, that's changing. Don't get me wrong. Like Trump, Cortez, they are part of that change. And I know that a lot of people have been going on at Trump recently because he's not been doing everything that the sort of populist base wants. I'm sure he's got constraints on him, but to be honest with you, maybe he is a little bit neoliberal in his own ways. But so neoliberalism is generally quite hard to define. Most people just don't bother. So I'll define it essentially as the EU. I think that the EU is kind of a manifestation of neoliberalism. So it's the free movement of goods, services, capital, and people. Traditional capitalism, like sort of nationalistic capitalism, the sort of capitalism that Bannon is proselytizing, is just the free movement of goods and services. This is a simplified way of describing it. I mean, there's quite a lot of writing on it, but it never seems to come across very well. Never seems to land home and really take hold in the public imagination. But basically, it's capitalism with a free movement of goods, with people and capital. And I actually don't think that's a very good idea because I think you undermine the nation state and you end up creating just all kinds of demonstrable concentrations of wealth, the sort of thing that she's complaining about. That's how capitalism really centralizes and concentrates, is when it can be moved anywhere in the world, it tends to move to certain places. When it can only be moved anywhere in a country, then worldwide, capitalism is a lot more spread out. Problem I have, obviously, is that when corporations do end up buying out governments with the use of lobbying, all totally legal, obviously, that's a problem. Because it turns the focus of the nation state, or whatever state you happen to be living under, for example the European Union, against the interests of the people themselves and in favour of the high-powered lobby groups, the moneyed interests, the elite classes. And I think that does sort of tend towards the sort of thing that Marx is concerned about, because the way the EU is regulating at the moment, like, I personally want to see the EU put money into competition against Silicon Valley, but instead the EU is over-regulating and, like, you know, with Article 11 and Article 13, creating artificial barriers to entry to the industries in order to try and protect European culture, whatever that means. But what this does is mean that Google, YouTube, Silicon Valley are the only ones who can actually afford to hit the standards that they're trying to put into place, making them the only game in town and one that they're already oppositional towards. Not good for the regular people, creating a two-tier system. You're either in the club or you're not in the club, whether the people in the club even like each other at all. But it keeps everyone else out, and I don't like that. I want to see more competition. I would like to see them putting money in startups and things like that, and helping competition grow and replace Silicon Valley in a sort of natural marketplace. And yeah, sure, a government can, you know, offer loans to these sort of companies and stuff if they want to try and, you know, push their country to compete in that regard. I don't see a problem with that, you know, especially if it's like an emerging industry and you need a boost would make things much quicker and easier for everyone else. I think it's a great idea. If we're going to have any kind of government intervention in the economy, that would at least help. But the thing is, what I'm suggesting is a rather nationalistic way of looking at it. It's suggesting that the people in the country will benefit if we start investing in certain ways. So then we should do this, you know. But if you don't care, if you're like someone like Jeff Bezos, why the fuck would you care about that, right? Because, and this is exactly the sort of thing that Cortez is talking about. Amazon paying zero taxes on over $11 billion in profit for 2018. I mean, If that's not the result of an irredeemable system, I don't know what is. But it's not the fact that capitalism exists that Amazon is paying zero in taxes. It is because, and I've been saying this for years myself, it is because corporations have basically bought out our governments. And they did this all through the 80s and 90s. I mean, this isn't new. This is the result of decades and decades and decades of lobbying, of billions of dollars being thrown at every Western government. Because the same sort of thing happened in the UK with... I don't think it was Amazon. It was, I don't know, like Starbucks or something like that. They just didn't pay any tax. And they actually, and probably Amazon as well, to be honest. I should have checked before I started recording this. But there are corporations, international corporations operating in Britain, that receive money from the taxpayer and don't pay any tax. And it drives me insane. I hate it. It's absolutely awful, and it's not how the system should be. But it wasn't the small businessman who lobbied for that system, is it? It wasn't the guy running the corner shop or who owns like an electrical store in town or something. It wasn't him that organised all of this. No, this is the result of big money into government. This is the one thing that the Young Turks and all that, those sort of people can talk about with 100% certainty. This is just a moral wrong. It should not be this way. This is what we could describe as a rigged system in favour of the ultra wealthy. And this is the problem I have with neoliberalism. They have free reign to just move around the world wherever they want and move money around the world wherever they want. Why should Jeff Bezos be free to buy up half of a third world country just because he's the richest man in the world? Why should he be able to do that? That's obviously going to be against the interests of the people in the country, but they'll have no recourse. And this is what happened in Guatemala with the United Fruit Company. They ended up calling it like the octopus that owned half the country and all of the fucking railways, the roads, the electricity grid, all this sort of stuff that a foreign company owned. And obviously it turned them into serfs in their own land. There's no doubting that capitalism, when left unfettered, can have negative effects. And I think neoliberalism is the sort of expression of that, is the way that we identify it. Because what Cortez is saying when she's saying it's irredeemable, what she's saying is it's irredeemable that we allow entities with such raw power to exploit other areas against people who have no recourse. There's nothing they can do. All of this is a done deal above their heads, a million miles away. This is what national governments are meant to be there to do, is to protect these people from that kind of thing. But it doesn't happen because of the neoliberal global system we have, and the fact that these corporations just buy them out, where they don't outright bully them and things like this and assassinate them. But I'm not, that's all then conspiracy theory stuff. But this is the point, though. It's not a fair system, but what she's talking about is not what we just describe as capitalism, which is a person owning their own business, operating with their own wealth, and owning the fruits of their own labour, obviously. The ability to freely trade without excessive government interference, things like this. Like just the movement of goods and services, selling your own labour at whatever value you negotiate with an employer. And the thing is, I know I always whine about corporations, but I don't think they shouldn't exist. I just don't think they should have the reach and power and influence that they do have at the moment. I think it's demonstrable negative to our countries. And this why the sort of, the sort of like leftist open borders ideology and orthodoxy, and as if this is a moral position, I find to be distinctly immoral, because it just doesn't, it's not something that anyone's ever voted for. It's all been done behind our backs. No one has ever said, yeah, open the borders. I want 250,000 people coming in every year onto a small island. Have the Americans ever voted on having 1 million legal immigrants a year into the United States, on top of however many illegal ones there are? Of course they haven't. And who does it benefit? Well, it doesn't benefit you if you're competing for jobs, does it? If you're low skilled or on that sort of end of the ladder, and you're looking for a job, having loads of other people there competing for that job who have got roughly similar skill set to you, you're not benefited, are you? But if you're the one hiring, man, that's good times. That's really good times. It's the same as it's the same as being like any kind of private service as well, like the NHS. It doesn't benefit you, the person paying for the NHS, if the waiting room is filled with people who didn't come from the country and didn't pay into the system. But it is good for the person who's arrived and who has an illness and who hasn't paid. Here's some free medical care that you didn't pay for and you won't have to pay into, or at least, not in any sort of significant proportion. But that's the unholy marriage of neoliberalism and progressivism right there as well. They want it for the cheap labour, and the progressives, the neoliberals want it for cheap labour, and the progressives want it because they think they're saving people. And it's like, brilliant. And it's just you paying for this, just so you know. So yeah, it's this sort of thing. And the thing about this, right? The worst thing about the Amazon thing is that Amazon haven't even done anything wrong. They're not going to get punished for this. Jeff Bezos is like, yeah, well, we've paid all the corporation tax in the US that we are required to pay. And he's probably right. He's probably right. I mean, like in this article, it details how Trump cut corporation tax, which hasn't actually helped and has massively made the deficit spike because the Treasury is making less money now, obviously. He didn't close the loopholes, which is how Amazon are not paying any taxes. And like I said earlier, who got those loopholes in place? It wasn't the mom and pop stores, was it? It wasn't local butcher. No, it was corporations like Amazon. It's a big club and you ain't in it.